Hello, everyone. This is Jason White, and welcome to our seventh ISO podcast. I'm joined on this podcast by Juha Boss. Juha, how are you?
Good, I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah. Well, this is a very exciting day. We received such a positive response from our first driver interview, and today we bring you another very special guest. He's a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it my very best shot. Uh, it's been said that our guest is the most versatile driver ever to have taken a wheel in hand. You name it, and he's won in it. Grand Prix cars, stock cars, Indy cars, sports cars, sprint cars. In fact, he's taken the checkered flag 111 times in a career that spanned 5 decades and 6 continents. He's the only driver to have won the Indianapolis 500, the Daytona 500, and the Formula One World Driving Championship. And he's renowned as one of the sport's premier ambassadors. He's the patriarch of one of the world's most prominent racing families, and we are thrilled to have him with us here today. Please welcome to the podcast, Mario Andretti. Mario, great to see you. Thanks so much for making the time for us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We're thrilled to see that you're healthy and you're doing well. We'd like, first of all, we'd like to offer you our sympathies on the passing of your brother, Aldo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this has been a difficult start to the year for you and your family, but you must be really heartened by the many tributes and well wishes that have been pouring in.
That's for sure. I mean, that is totally heartwarming and very helpful in situations like that, quite honestly. Again, I'm so extremely grateful, for the time that people take, to express their condolences from all over. I think Aldo was smiling at that part.
Yeah,
I assure you.
yeah. When you reflect on Aldo's life, what is it about him that you'll remember most as a brother and as a fellow racer?
Well, all I know, we started our life together, 80 years of it. And, he's the one that I think paid the price for all the things that I got away with, along the way, career-wise. We both had the same dreams, the same, passion and desire to, in the sport. And he had to live that part through me and his own sons, again, but he was still, a very happy, satisfied person, always extremely positive. And I think that example was vivid, within all of us, because again, there was many challenges in his life, and but he never, ever, ever expressed anything such as, okay, I'm the victim, or anything. Never, ever. So again, that was something very admirable, in my opinion, for as a man.
Yeah, it's great. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's the importance of family. And I'll bet that's a great deal of the thought that's coming through with the well wishes as well. People are hyper conscious of family and how important it is.
Yes, no question. I guess, the whole world is undergoing, some precarious times, and but just hope that there's some light at the end of the tunnel here, and so we can start resuming a lot of the activities that we love, on top of everything. They're necessary, but also that we love.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Juha because Juha is, as I mentioned, he's in Belgium, and he has several Belgian-centric questions for you, being that you've had an international career. So Juha, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Jason. Now, Mario, I understand that you sent your son and your nephew to a racing school in Belgium. That piqued my interest. But why Belgium and not like more renowned schools in the US or the UK?
Well, mainly because I had some friends there, and that's what it. Motor racing is a small world, and there are no borders. And so again, just as far as race drivers, I mean. Lucien Bianchi, was one, very close friend. We spent a lot of time together, the family, and then Jackie Eakes, and but the school was a Teddy Paulette school, and Andre Paulette, and we became friends just through motor racing, and meeting different events. And then one point, I think it was in Indianapolis. Andre was, and I said, I have these two boys, and I think they need to be in Europe. And he says, you send them, and we'll take care of them. And that was really that was a good stint for the kids, and then I would join them, whenever I would have a Grand Prix, like I was in Germany, then they were testing in Austria. And again, it was all a good thing, good experience. But again, just friendships that developed throughout because of our sport, and something that is very dear to us today, indeed.
Thank you. Something else that I recently remembered is you drove that Ferrari 712 in Can-Am. I've seen that car once. I can remember it as being the loudest car I've ever seen. But what were your thoughts on driving it?
Well, it was a car that needed some work. Obviously, I think it was a project that was put together as a B project by Ferrari, and the biggest issue that I think I encountered in the car was the chassis was very flexible, and so because of that, the car was predictable. It was fun to drive to some degree, but it was not the best handling car, unfortunately. It just needed more testing. I love the power of the engine. Everything was, a 7-liter Ferrari engine. Obviously, it was very, very good. And I just wish that, Ferrari would have had more interest in the Can-Am series, but at the time was basically the prototypes. There was the main objective here for a championship, and the prototypes were very competitive, and those are the days where my teammate was Jackie, and Jackie Eakes and I got along so well, just even the physical size, I think played a part, but more than that, though, I mean, he was just an incredible teammate and from every standpoint, and that's why we won some races together.
Now, at the other end, you started your Formula One career with Ferrari, and the end of your Grand Prix career coincided with the end of ground effects in Formula One, or the beginning and the end of ground effects. What changes or adaptations did it require from you to get the best out of those cars?
Well, as a driver, you just go by feel, and when we started developing ground effects, what was the feature? There was downforce, and downforce gives you, more grip through the corners. So what does every driver want to do? Be faster through the corners. And so again, my career started with Lotus, actually, and then my first win in Formula One was with Ferrari. And then my last race was with Ferrari, which is great, in my career. But again, as far as what the driver has to do, as far as adapting, you're just looking. The driver is always looking for two things: more power and more grip. and more power comes from the engine, and then more grip, obviously, is from the downforce, the aerodynamic downforce, and the best part about ground effects was downforce without drag penalty. You can achieve downforce by having, larger wings, surface wings, and so forth. But the drag penalty is obviously something that detracts from a lap time. But the ground effects is free downforce, and that was the beauty of it all.
And after Lotus, you went to Alfa Romeo. They didn't have the best of years in 1980. So from the outside, it looks like an interesting career move. What motivated you to have the short stint in that team?
Well, I had some friends there, very good friends, and I went by heart because, quite honestly, I had the opportunity to join McLaren. I had a choice, either McLaren or Alfa Romeo, and I joined Alfa Romeo, which was a mistake, not because Alfa Romeo was not capable. It's just that the rule changes at that point, and I can go into it. It's very complicated. And then the Alfa Romeo team did not follow something that was a cheating situation where everybody was doing. You know, it was about ride height, and we suffered through that. I think if Alfa Romeo would have done that, like the other teams, you know, Brabham, Ferrari, everybody, McLaren, everybody did that. They had a special hydraulic system where, you know, you had a rule where you had to have a specific ride height to minimize some of the downforce, and for everyone. And everybody was just clearing the pits where you had to clear a box. And then as soon as it passed that, they had a hydraulic system where the car would drop. And it was illegal, but everybody was doing it. So nobody was protesting, except that Alfa Romeo, they wanted to stay true to the rules because they were afraid to be embarrassed. And that we suffered tremendously. And I tell you why, because we had a test at Paul Ricard during the season. And I said, during the test, I want to have the car lower like everybody else is doing naturally. And I was immediately competitive, immediately. And our engineer, the venerable Carlo Chitti, just totally didn't want to do that. He said, I cannot afford to be embarrassed, and so on and so forth, Alfa Romeo. And so we paid dearly for that. And it's unfortunate because the Alfa Romeo, the cars had a good reliability factor, which is very important, especially in those days. But Giacomelli and I suffered tremendously through that, which was unfortunate.
Now, Jason mentioned you were also you were F1 champion. You're also the last American F1 champion. There are many theories as to why there hasn't been another American to win the series since you did. Do you have any thoughts as to why this is the case?
Well, I said this many times, and I think it's the reason that in America you can have a great career to be proud of just by staying here because of the series that you have, the IndyCar series, you have NASCAR. And then, even a sports prototype. But if you're in prototypes and INSA, you get a chance to do Le Mans and all that sort of thing. But as far as the really, the seasons such as, single seaters, you can just be very satisfied. You can see many international drivers, the champion, like, from New Zealand. You have six-time champion in America, satisfied at being in IndyCars. So, and maybe some of the inspiring drivers or aspiring drivers that would like to do Formula One, probably don't get the attention, in Europe from the teams in Europe. And it's too bad to some degree. I think it would help Formula One tremendously from the standpoint of building a stronger fan base. If there would be, an American driver driving with for one of the top teams, and until that happens, America is going to suffer to some degree as far as fan base for Formula One. It's incredible, but. Again, what drove me there was that, throughout my career, while I was still driving midgets, I was thinking Formula One. A lot of the purpose to try to navigate my way into championships here to be able to earn, some attention, to approach Formula One. And I fortunately I befriended Colin Chapman, when he was here with Jim Clark. And in fact, I asked him at one point before we left India, I said, Colin, this was 1965. I said, Colin, I would like to someday do Formula One. And he says, Mario says, when you think you're ready, you call me and I will have a car for you. and true to that, he kept the promise, because 3 years later I called him. I said, I'd like to do the last 2 races of the season, and he had a car for me. So, and in fact, I put the car on pole in my very first race. And that, why? Because it was a competitive car. I was very fortunate. See, the whole thing is, to be able to drive for a team that's capable, and I had that opportunity. Again, there you go. I know there are several drivers here. Some drive, one in particular, even in my son Michael's team, that I know would do well in Formula One, and he would like to be there. His name is Colton Herta, and he trained. Actually, he did like 3 or 4 years in Europe when he was just a teenager. And but he's very, very good. I think good technical, and as a young lad, he just acts like he's been around for forever. So again, I would love to see someone like that be picked up by a top team, but I don't know. Looks like it's not happening right away.
What do you feel could increase the American involvement at that level? What do you think would be required for it?
Well, here again would be it would have to be one of the top 3 teams in Formula One to say, you know what, let's try somebody like that. And I think it would have a lot of advantage. I think from a promotional standpoint, I think many global sponsors would probably, the global sponsors that are very strong in America, but also abroad, and I think they would benefit from being able to talk about and brag about an American driver that would be competitive. But it would have to be with one of the top 3 teams. The only way you're going to be able to showcase. It's a perfect example. When you saw Russell, in Mercedes, immediately he was competitive with Bottas, and in fact, we should have won that race, But so as you can see, there's a lot of disparity in Formula One, which is nothing new, by the way. It's always been like that. I don't know historically if Formula One ever had more than 3 teams really capable of winning any race any given year, and usually it's maybe just 2 teams. And the objective for any driver is to be able someday during their career to drive for one of those teams, because otherwise you have no chance, really to win. And that's the way it is. It's always been like that.
I'm going to pass the mic on to Jason because he's got a few more American-related questions.
Okay.
No, but that's interesting because we've heard a lot about IndyCar racing. When we interviewed Stefan Johansson, he told us that the competitiveness of the series right now is great. That like any number of teams could win. So to your point, that's one of the key differences I would think between the 2 series. Especially.
Well, no question about it. Yeah, because the IndyCar series is a spec series, mm-hmm. and everybody basically has the same car. And there are very, slight differences that things that you can do to the car. And from a driver standpoint, I think, there's a lot of depth in the field, and you see that, that almost every team has a realistic chance of bringing results and winning. But that's the way it is now. I love Formula One for what it is, in the sense that. Was born to be a team that manufactured their own cars. And technically, as a driver, I love that. I like that even better, quite honestly. But from the standpoint of producing more of a competitive environment, within the teams, the spec series is that. So mm-hmm. You'll always see more animated races, more competitive races because of that. And IndyCar offers that. So again, it's all about strategically, so what do you prefer?
Hmm.
um, again, that's what it comes down to, really. So.
Yeah, the other thing about IndyCar is that they're benefiting from an influx of international drivers right now. And one could argue probably that the introduction of the aero screen and other safety improvements are helping to facilitate this. You've had a front row seat for a lot of safety improvements over the years. What, in your opinion, have been the most significant safety innovations in, say, the past 20 or 30 years?
Well, I don't think you can say, okay, just one thing. I think safety, the safety features, the safety aspect of our sport has been a work in progress since, I'd just say, especially the 80s. And because it didn't take just the cars, it took, addressing the safety of the circuits as well. And that took time. And quite honestly, it's still a work in progress. There was at one point that we were losing drivers that never had a broken bone. Why? Because of fires.
Hmm.
And so to contain the fuels, with the bladders, that actually were used during the Vietnam War in the helicopters that were being shut down with 20 millimeter cannon bullets, and then all of a sudden Goodyear developed those bladders that would withstand that, and in Indy cars, that's what we started. They started using the bladders, and all of a sudden, that the fire was being contained more and more. And so again, but all along, I mean, it's and the thing that I think is very important to point out is the fact that as even as drivers, when we organized the GPDA to address the safety, because almost every safety feature is a performance penalty, either aerodynamic or weight penalty. And so you had to reach a point where the sanctioning bodies would incorporate all the safety rules into, so everyone had to do it. So there was no specific penalty, not that, and so once that got in place, then, things just continue. And today, the cars are instrumented, and every incident is different. So there's usually have a technical committee that examines situations that happen during the season. Sometimes if you had something that was really had to be dealt, the attention to. You always had the incident, just like we've seen, Grosjean's, incident in Bahrain, for instance. Thank God for the halo there, but still, there was fire, and so they had to address what, not the fuel tank, but they had to address the reserve tank, that caught fire. So almost every incident provides something different. Then now they're going to address that. So and again, but that's the beauty about, I think, our sport, that because it's reacting to that. You're trying to make as safe as humanly possible, but there's always something that comes up. But they're vigilant. The sanctioning bodies are very, very much into that part. That's the wonderful thing about the drivers of today. I'm knocking on wood, but the drivers of today have the opportunity to retire on their own terms, like 99.9%, I think, which which is great.
Yeah, that is. I mean, obviously early on that was unheard of, but
Yeah,
what?
well, in my, in the 60s when I started, even in Indy cars, the chance of survival was probably less than 50%.
Yeah. Yeah, when you think about safety too, there's another aspect that, obviously, I mean, you mentioned Grosjean's accident. Uh, there are some incidents that you could argue, or at least from the outside, they appear that they could be caused by over eagerness from the driver's side. Do you think that there's a chance in some cases that increased safety gives drivers a feeling of security that leads them sometimes to take bigger or more unnecessary chances?
Oh, no question about it. Yeah, 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 yeah. No question about it. Just like I remember, even in sprint cars, as soon as they, when you didn't have a cage, Well, you didn't want to bang wheels with anybody. I mean, you had to be careful because that's usually could create a an end over end flip, which is the end of you. And once they put a cage on there, man, we're banging wheels like crazy,
Hmm.
So that's a natural thing. And you're when you're in that seat, you try to do whatever you can, and that's somewhat reasonable to try to get away with. Sometimes you don't
Hmm.
because as you say, you have that protection, so obviously you're gonna risk more. But it is what it is. It's still a competitive sport, and as a driver, you don't want to leave anything on the table. And that's it. You're always going to have that.
Yeah, along with the safety, I mean, your IndyCar career in particular saw huge technical changes. Like one thing that I can think of, for example, is in the 70s you had massive amounts of boost combined with very, very lively handling. And gradually that changed to a situation where the cars stuck to the road like glue and had a lot less boost. Which of those situations did you find more challenging as a driver?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's when you have horsepower, and
Hmm.
and we in qualifying trim sometimes you could just do wheel spin in fifth gear, So we had, and today, I mean, you dream about that. Yeah, as a driver, I used to love that, even to be able to crank up, have more boost just for qualifying. Of course, but they have that in Indianapolis. They get like extra 80 horsepower just for qualifying, which is from a driver standpoint, that's exciting always. But the beautiful thing about not taking 100% out of these engines and just have to mileage, to a certain level, before having been penalized, but that obviously helped in the reliability factor. And here again, you have races where sometimes you don't have anybody dropping out with mechanical issues, maybe an incident or something. But especially in long races like Indianapolis, you have out of 33, usually have maybe one or two cars dropping out. The whole field still running at the end. So from a standpoint of the show, that's wonderful. I look back in my career, and I feel that I was always 10 tenths right from the beginning. I was not very patient, and maybe that style would have really worked today because maybe uh, maybe I was taking too much out of the engine or something at the beginning. I should have been more patient, but I didn't have that. And today you have to be 10 tenths from the get go when the flag drops, and I love that. That was my style, 100%. So again, but times change, and sanctioning bodies always want to do the best, come up with the best rules possible to give the most competitive shows, and the fans demand more and more nowadays. They're much more educated, and so you got to give them what they want.
Hmm.
And so it's always it's a daunting job, to be able to keep that balance, from as far as the rules are concerned, and still keep the technical interest up there.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I remember that you had a opportunity in the kart years to voice the driver concerns because you were on the kart board for a
Yes.
while, correct? Yeah,
Yeah. I was a driver rep. Yes.
cool.
And yeah, and I think again, it's always very important to have a voice, with the sanctioning body, and that's always open. It's there today as well, and they hear you. They hear
Hmm.
you. I think we all have a lot of the same interests at heart, and in those days, like in the 80s, and even especially the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of work to be done yet, and a lot of that is already in place. So again, I think the drivers are enjoying a lot of the benefits from what the sport has learned, and there's a lot less to be able to contribute, if you will. in those senses, because our only concerns were safety. It was that was the only concern that we had throughout, as far as to have the proper representation.
Yeah. The other thing that is striking when you watch old Indianapolis 500s is the difference in technique. And we were curious, but this may seem to be a bit of an esoteric question, but this is one that's boggled our physics experts when we try to recreate IndyCar series. When you look at cars in the 70s, they seem to be barely touching the apron, just grazing the painted line. And then when you look at the 80s and 90s, there's situations where they're going completely below the painted line. Was there something about driving in the 70s that made it better to just be above that line as far as driving is concerned, or was there a safety reason for not going below the line? Maybe you can shed some insight on this.
Well, going below the line was always a bit of a no-no. That was like a very vague rule, like you shouldn't go below the line because of that. But you know what? I drove in all those years, and I used every inch of the track. And then you know what? And that's it. I think that it got to the point that they redid the configuration of the track. They eliminated the so-called the warm-up lane at Indianapolis. So and I think a lot of it was done even because of the stock cars as well. Because they were basically all the way down to the grass. Uh, but as a driver, as you can see anywhere, whether it's the ovals, whether it's the road courses, you're going to try to use every inch of the track. I mean, you see that even in Formula One, they have to have track limits designated because there's so much runoff area that you just if there's pavement, you're going to go for it. And at Indy the same way. It's if there's pavement all the way down to the grass, that's where you're going to go. I mean, I do that with my two-seater at Indy. It's just I use every inch that's available. That's the idea. Quite honestly, you don't want to leave anything on the table.
Yeah, regardless of whether it's oval or road
Or
course.
road course.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Speaking of that, I mean, again, talking about the longevity of your career, and you were in Indy cars at a point where it was mostly ovals, and then towards the end of your career, you got into a point where there was a really eclectic mix of ovals and road courses and street courses. Why do you, when you look back now, why do you think the series moved in that direction? Was it something that was organic, or was it planned, or what's your take on that?
Well, I think by moving in that direction of more road races, I think the series gained a lot of international interest and status. And I think today, if you look at the IndyCar series, is the most diversified series at that level, and that's a beauty of it. And I think I said this, and I'll maintain it. At the end of the day, I think the IndyCar champion is the most complete driver of any series, because to be able to be a champion and be competitive up there, you have to be competitive everywhere. Street course, natural road course, short oval, super speedway, you have it all. And no other series can claim that. You can see that NASCAR is looking at more and more road races now, but really proper road races, road courses. You can see even at the Watkins Glen, they're using the short course, which is, it's limited numbers. So again, I think the other series are looking at this phenomenon, if you will, and just, I think it'll create more interest personally. And I think it will widen the dimension of the drivers, the ability. You see NASCAR, there are many drivers that are going, they're driving long distance races. Like you can see that some of the top drivers you will see, like Chase Elliott and NASCAR champion, and Jimmy Johnson at Daytona next weekend for the 24 hours. And the crossover is wonderful. Just even to get to that thing, to see even Jimmy Johnson now that retired from NASCAR, and he's going to be doing the IndyCar road races with none other than the Ganassi team. So, he's going to be in a competitive car. Is that going to be interesting or what? Absolutely. So all of these things are good things that they're happening. I think from my standpoint, I know how much satisfaction I got of from the opportunity of driving, the different disciplines, and not only driving that, but trying to win type of thing, and I found that the ultimate satisfaction in my career. I would not have had it any other way. And you see that even today, there's a lot more of that that's catching on again. I think when you look at drivers like Fernando Alonso, all of a sudden he comes out of Formula One and he's got objectives. He wants to win Indy, he wants to win Le Mans. He won Le Mans. And so, again, it just spices up the career. And that's a good thing. It's great for the sport. And anything that's great for the sport is good.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't wait to see how Jimmy does this coming year in IndyCars. When you think about how many different series you ran, there were times when you were jetting back and forth across the Atlantic to do F1 and USAC. In fact, you were doing that at the time you won the championship. So not only were you competing at the top level, but you were a champion while you're in both series, which is amazing. Talk about that for a bit, and like, what kind of impact did that have on you in terms of your personal life and in terms of your performance?
Well, I don't think it had any impact on my performance, for sure. Yeah. I absolutely, even, sometimes I was criticized for that, but if that would have been the factor, I don't think I would have done it. But it's just something I wanted to do. And my every clause in my contracts, had that forbidden, to do, but I defied all that. And, I keep saying, I was in my championship year, I was driving IndyCars for Roger Penske, and during the off weekends in Formula One. And I was testing at Silverstone, and Colin Chapman said, "Well, what are you doing this weekend? We don't have a race." I just said that question. I said, "I'm driving." I think about, I don't know where I was driving. I think it was Michigan for Roger. I said, "I'm driving an IndyCar race." He says, "Well, you can't do that." I said, "I know, but I will." So that kind of a thing. So many of the drivers today, they're asked, why don't you move? Why don't you do another discipline now and then? And they say, "Well, I'm a contract." Well, every one of my contracts, had that clause for forbidding me from doing anything else. And I never contested that, doing my contracts. I'm going to do it anyway. So no use even arguing about it. And just that, I was going to have no one to determine what, the path of my career, no matter what. And but it's just something I just love to do. And again, like you say, that year when I won the championship, I won a couple of IndyCar races at the same time, and also I won the IROC championship that year.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I didn't give anything up. There was a lot of travel, and the beauty about that, in those times, we had a Concorde going back to Europe, which was phenomenal for me. I mean, I was in 1978, I did 24 crossings with the Concorde, that just 1 year alone.
Wow.
So again, that was real peachy for me, because I even had my own airplane, to pick me up, at Kennedy and go somewhere else here in the States. So couldn't have done it any other way, but I took advantage of what was available and made things work. I mean, when my first race that I was supposed to do at Monza, I had to come back on Friday, on a Friday. I had to come back on a Saturday of that weekend to do the Hoosier 100 on the dirt in Indianapolis. had to qualify. Then when I went back, they did not allow me to participate, even though my car was seventh on the grid because I only qualified on Friday on the first session,
Oh,
and because of the 24-hour rule, even though we had an understanding, but there was a protest. So it's a long story, but I remember I would go like from Argentina to DuQuoin, Illinois on a dirt, so. And I love that. I love that, those opportunities to drive, the cars that were so far apart. It was like peaches and blueberries, as far as the difference,
yeah.
and so yeah. Again, I wouldn't have done anything different, in my career because I feel that's where I derive the most satisfaction.
Yeah, and also in 1978, you had the pleasure of introducing IndyCar racing to England, both at Brands Hatch and at Silverstone. I mean, that must have been a big thrill to bring it to an audience that had never seen it before.
True. I think during the kart days, I think there was between either radio and TV. Our races were really being shown or talked about, in 120 countries.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of international interest during those kart days for IndyCar. I'd love to see that come back.
Yeah. Well, there is one other aspect that we'd like to touch on as far as your versatility and your longevity, and that's your fitness level that you've been able to maintain through the years. I remember watching the 1993 Michigan 500 that Nigel Mansell won, and at the end, you seemed when they went to interview you after you got out of the car, you seemed fresh as a daisy, and then Nigel, by comparison, seemed just overcome with exhaustion. Uh, how have you been able to maintain your fitness all these years? Have you had always a fitness program that you've kept in mind, or in the early years was it just driving the car that kept you fit?
Well, Jason, I think that's it. I think I was in the fighting ring, every weekend. I didn't have to have a fitness
Hmm.
program because I was doing exactly what I needed to do day in and day out. Throughout my career, I look back, I don't think I ever had more than a couple of weeks, 2, 3 weeks in between, the seasons, because somehow I always found something to do before the regular season would start. So I was in a race car most of the time, and if there weren't races, I was testing. It was
Hmm.
just, we would test until almost Christmas, and then start in January again because then you go to the warmer climates. Here in the States, you could test on the West Coast, year round, and we used to do a lot of testing in Phoenix, and so again, I was always in a race car, and because we always had a new car, we every year until the end of my career uh, there was no spec series. I never really drove a spec series per se, except for the IROC. But as far as when you get a new car, you always there were no restrictions in testing, so we were in that race car immediately right after the holidays.
Hmm.
There was some season earlier on when I raced in between, right, right before, right after the New Year's and so forth. So I was always in a race car, and that's the reason why when I retired, my body, I had some real issues that that I had to overcome, physically, that were not understood, and we came to I was under the auspices of a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and he came to a conclusion after I explained about my life's activity. He says your body has been used to living on adrenaline your
Hmm.
entire adult life, and all of a sudden now you're out of the cockpit. And quite honestly, as soon as then I started going back, I did like Le Mans a few times, and I did some tests. And every time I'm in a race car, I said, "Oh man, I don't have to take any pills." That was
Hmm.
that's what my body wanted. and it took a few years for me to sort of get back, to sort of feeling totally normal, in that respect. So as you can see, driving all this, in all my years, I drove almost actually sanctioned almost 900 races, but with the unsanctioned races that we're not counting, in the first 2 years of my life, I drove over 900 races in my life. So that kept me pretty busy.
Yeah. And this is going to be a difficult question probably to answer to finish with, but, talking about your versatility, you drove so many different types of cars. Was there ever actually any type of series or car that you wanted to try, but for one reason or another you didn't get to?
No, not really. People have asked me about rallying or something, and I obviously, you know, didn't do that for many reasons. Because in rally, you have to devote a lot of time ahead of time to the pre-runs and all that. And the only thing that I said, okay, I did some rallying, like the Pikes Peak Hill climb. I called that a rally event, and so I did that 3 times, and then I finally won it. And I figured I don't want to do it again because that was really dangerous. But no, I have no regrets. I look back and I feel that I covered all the ground that I really wanted to cover, and I'm just pinching myself that I had those opportunities.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this interview, and this has been really insightful. Juha, do you have anything else that's on the tip of your tongue you'd like to ask Mario?
No, I don't. I just want to thank Mario for the time he took to talk to us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. Definitely check out Mario, marioandretti.com, correct?
Indeed.
All right, excellent. We'd like to also extend a personal thank you to
Patty
Reed and Amy for helping to set this up today. And Mario,
they're the best.
Yeah,
they're the best for me. Yes,
well,
my right and right arm and everything.
Well, we're really appreciative of your time, Mario, and we wish you all the best in 2021. Thanks so much. Yeah. So for Mario Andretti and for Juha Boss, this is Jason White saying so long. We'll see you on our next podcast. Take care, everyone, and be safe.